The night was cold and dark. The forest was full of sharp branches, thick fog, and the sound of heavy breathing. A small alien girl ran fast through the trees, her glowing skin making her easy to see in the shadows. She didn't look back, but she could hear the creatures chasing her. Their growls were deep and their steps were fast. She had no shoes, no coat, just torn clothes and blood on her feet. Every breath felt like fire in her lungs, but she didn't stop. Behind her, the creatures got closer. They were tall, black-skinned, monsters with red eyes and long claws. They moved like hunters, fast and wild. She had escaped them once, but they had found her again. Her heart beat fast. Not just from fear, but from pain, too. Her body was weak, but her spirit was strong. She was not from this planet. She had landed here by accident when her small ship was attacked. Now she was alone, hunted, and had no one to trust. But still, she ran. Then, between the trees, she saw something. Light. Warm, yellow light coming from a window. A small wooden cabin stood at the edge of the forest. Smoke came from the chimney, and inside she could see the shadow of someone moving. Hope burned in her chest. Maybe this was safety. Maybe someone here would help her. She didn't stop to think. She pushed her tired legs forward and ran toward the cabin. Behind her, the creatures screamed, louder than before. They were angry now. Close. Maybe 10 seconds behind her. Inside the cabin, a human man named Jack was pouring hot tea. He lived alone in the forest, far from the big cities. His only friend was a small pug named Max, who snored beside the fireplace. Jack was an old soldier, now retired. He liked peace, quiet, and simple things. Suddenly, Max sat up and barked loudly. Jack looked up, surprised. He had never seen Max bark like this. Before he could move, he heard something outside, a crash, a scream, then silence. He grabbed his flashlight and slowly walked toward the door. Max followed, his tail low, but his body alert. Jack opened the door and froze. A strange girl stood there, her skin glowing faintly in the dark. She had cuts on her arms and dirt on her face. Her silver hair was tangled and wet. She looked up at him with wide, scared eyes, then fell forward, unconscious. Jack caught her just before she hit the ground. She was ice cold, shaking, and barely breathing. He didn't know what she was, but he knew fear when he saw it. Without a word, he lifted her gently and carried her inside. Max barked again, running to the window and growling low. Something was still outside. Something dangerous. Jack placed the girl on a soft rug near the fire. He covered her with a thick blanket and checked her pulse. She was alive, but just barely. He looked out the window and saw shadows moving between the trees. Red eyes blinked in the dark, then vanished. Jack locked the door and loaded his old rifle. He didn't know what was going on, but he wasn't going to let anything hurt a child, not while she was under his roof. The girl stirred and opened her eyes slowly. She saw the fire, the warm room, and the little dog sitting beside her. Max wagged his tail and licked her hand. The girl blinked, confused, then gave a small smile. The first one in many days. Jack sat beside her with a cup of tea. He didn't speak, just waited. She took the cup with shaky hands and drank slowly. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't cry. She just nodded, as if saying thank you. Outside, the creatures waited in the dark. They had lost her, for now, but they would return. The hunt was not over, and deep in the shadows, something far worse than the creatures watched the cabin from afar. Its mind was full of rage. It wanted the girl, and it would not stop until she was back in its hands. Inside the cabin, the fire burned gently. The girl lay curled beside Max, who pressed close to her. She was still scared, still weak. But for the first time in days, she felt safe. She didn't know the human's name, but she knew this. He had opened his door, not with fear, but with kindness, and that simple act had changed everything. The room was warm and quiet. The fire crackled softly in the stone fireplace. The cabin smelled like tea, old wood, and burning pine. The alien girl slowly opened her eyes, blinking at the soft orange light. Her body hurt, but the warmth wrapped around her like a hug. She felt something soft against her chest, warm and breathing. It was Max, the small pug, curled up beside her. His little body was pressed close to hers as if guarding her. She watched him with wide eyes, unsure. He opened one eye and gave a sleepy snort. Then, with a little wag of his tail, he licked her arm. The girl flinched at first, unused to touch that didn't hurt. Then she smiled. A small, broken smile, but a real one. She reached out and touched the dog gently, her fingers brushing his soft fur. He didn't pull away. He leaned into her hand instead. Something inside her chest, something frozen and tight, began to melt. Jack watched quietly from the kitchen. He had made oatmeal and tea. He wasn't sure what to do. She wasn't human, and she clearly couldn't speak English. But he knew one thing. She was scared, hurt, and far from home. He had seen that look before. It was the same look he had seen in the eyes of war survivors. He brought her a bowl of warm oatmeal, setting it down on the table near her. She sat up slowly, her body shaking, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. He smiled gently and pointed to the food. She looked at him, then at the food, then back at him again. Slowly, she reached out and took the spoon. Her hands were thin, her fingers trembling. She ate slowly, carefully, as if unsure it was real. Each bite seemed to bring her back to life. Max stayed beside her the whole time. He licked her fingers, snuggled into her side, and gave small, happy grunts. She laughed once, very softly, like she forgot how. Jack heard it and smiled wider. He brought out a first aid kit and sat down across from her. She tensed, afraid he might hurt her, but he spoke gently, his voice low and calm. "It's okay," he said, showing her the bandages and ointment. "I just want to help." She watched carefully, then slowly nodded. He cleaned her wounds, burns, bruises, cuts from sharp branches, and worse, she didn't cry, but her eyes watered. Jack moved with care, every motion slow and soft. He wrapped her arms, her legs, even her feet, then gave her clean socks and a large hoodie from his closet. She looked strange in it, tiny, with glowing skin and silver hair, wearing a human's oversized hoodie. But somehow it made her look safe. Later, Jack pulled out an old tablet and opened a translation app. He pointed at himself. "Jack," he said, then pointed at her, waiting. She hesitated, then touched her chest and whispered, "Leary." Her voice was soft, barely there. Jack typed it in, and the screen glowed. Name, Leary. They shared a moment of understanding, a bridge forming between two different worlds, no longer just stranger and alien, now Jack and Leary. Max barked suddenly and ran to the door. Leary jumped in fear, her hand shaking. Jack stood quickly and peered out the window. Nothing, just snow and trees, but the silence outside was too perfect, too still. He could feel it. Something was still out there, watching. He locked the door, pulled the curtains, and made sure every window was sealed. Then he turned on a small lamp near the fire and set out 2 sleeping bags, one for him, one for her. Leary looked around, confused. Jack smiled, pointed to her, then to the sleeping bag beside Max. She nodded slowly and lay down, pulling the blanket over her shoulders again. Max crawled beside her like it was the most normal thing in the world. Jack stayed up late, sitting near the fire with his rifle across his lap. Leary watched him for a while, then finally closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Not just warm, but truly safe. There was no whip cracking, no screaming, no dark cage, only firelight. A small dog breathing softly, and a quiet human who didn't ask anything from her. Outside, the creatures moved between the trees. They sniffed the air, growled low, then slowly backed away. The warmth of the cabin, the scent of fire, and the bond inside kept them from getting closer. For now, Leary slept, curled beside the pug like a lost child. Jack watched over them, silent. Something deep in his chest stirred. He didn't know what her story was, but he knew this: she didn't belong out there in the cold, not anymore. As long as she was in his home, she was his to protect. The morning sun rose slowly over the trees. The snow outside the cabin shimmered under golden light. Jack opened the front door quietly, holding a hot cup of coffee. His boots crunched against the frozen ground as he stepped outside. Max followed, close behind, sniffing the air and wagging his little tail. At first, everything looked peaceful. The trees stood tall and silent, the forest calm, but then Jack saw them. Deep marks in the snow just beyond the porch. Strange footprints, too large to be human, with long claws dragging behind. Jack crouched near the tracks, his face tense. He counted 4 different sets, all surrounding the house. They had come close in the night, just a few feet from the door, and then they had left. Max growled softly, his fur standing up. Jack placed a hand on the dog's back, whispering, "Easy, boy." He followed the prints for a few steps, then stopped. The snow was disturbed in a way that made his stomach twist. The creatures didn't just pass through. They circled, waited, and watched. Jack returned to the cabin and closed the door tight. Inside, Leary was awake. Sitting cross-legged by the fire, she looked calm, but her eyes flicked toward the windows now and then. She clutched something small in her hand. A stone, smooth and glowing, faintly blue. Jack knelt beside her and opened his notebook. He drew the strange footprints and showed her. Leary stared at the sketch, then slowly nodded. She picked up the pencil and drew more beside his. This time she added symbols, jagged lines and circles around the feet. Then she pointed to her arm where an old scar ran deep. She pressed her fingers into the scar, then tapped the footprints again. Jack understood. "They did this to you," he whispered. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. He looked at her and said quietly, "Not again." Then he stood, opened a drawer, and pulled out a box of tools. All day, they worked. Jack nailed wooden boards across the windows, reinforced the back door. Leary helped, using her small hands to hold nails and carry supplies. She worked silently, focused, her eyes alert. Max followed them around like a tiny soldier, barking at every strange sound. Later, Jack went into the shed behind the cabin. He brought out tripwires, old motion sensors, and a rusted crossbow. It had been years since he needed any of it, but now the old soldier inside him was awake again. He set up traps near the tree line, sharp sticks hidden under snow, cans tied to fishing line. Every little sound would now alert him. He showed Leary how to trigger the traps and how to avoid them. She learned quickly, repeating the actions until she got them right. As the sun lowered in the sky, they stood at the edge of the forest. The air was cold, their breath turning into mist. Leary pointed at a tree with deep claw marks. She pressed her hand on the bark, closed her eyes, and whispered something. Jack watched, confused. She opened her eyes and drew in the snow below the tree. A symbol, like a warning sign, a spiral, broken by a sharp line. Then she pointed to the forest and shook her head. It meant danger. Jack nodded, understanding the message without words. He marked the tree with red paint from the shed, a signal to stay out. Then they returned to the cabin, their steps slow, the silence heavy. That night, Jack lit extra candles inside the house. He gave Leary a flashlight and a small walkie-talkie, with a button taped down. "If you hear anything," he said, pointing to the device, "and press this." She nodded and kept it close. They ate together by the fire. Soup and bread. Leary ate slowly, watching the flames dance. Max curled up between them, happy just to be near. Later, Jack opened his laptop and showed her a satellite image of the area. She leaned in, her glowing fingers pointing at the eastern side of the forest. There was a deep black spot, burned land, broken trees. She pointed to it, then tapped her chest. "That's where she came from." Jack zoomed in, trying to understand. "Is that where they found you?" he asked softly. She nodded, then drew a symbol on the screen with her finger, an eye with 3 points. She pointed at it, then at the ceiling. He understood. "They're watching." That night, Jack didn't sleep. He sat near the door, his rifle across his lap, listening. Outside, the forest was quiet, but not in a good way. It was the kind of quiet that made your skin crawl. Leary lay beside Max again, her hand resting on the little dog's back. He didn't bark, but his ears twitched with every sound. She whispered something in her language, a soft prayer. Then her hand reached out and touched the stone again. It pulsed with a gentle glow. The creatures had come close, too close, but now the girl was not alone, and the cabin was no longer just a home. It was a shield, a human, a pug, and an alien girl together, preparing for whatever came next. Snow fell gently through the trees. The forest looked quiet, but the silence was fake. Something was coming, something terrible. Jack felt it first, sitting by the window with his mug of cold coffee. Max growled, low and deep, his nose pointing toward the back of the cabin. Leary sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing more warning signs on scraps of paper. The stone she always carried was glowing brighter now, flickering like it felt fear. Jack stood, walked to the back door and slowly unlatched the lock. He opened it just a crack, just enough to see. Snow had stopped falling. The woods were still, too still. Then he heard it. Soft breathing, not human, not animal. Something heavier, something wrong. He closed the door fast and locked it again. "Get ready," he said in a low voice. Leary looked up, her eyes wide. She could feel it too. The air had changed. Max barked sharp and loud, and then all the lights flickered. The power went out, leaving only the fire and candlelight. Jack moved quickly, lighting oil lamps and handing Leary the flashlight. He gave her the crossbow, loaded and ready. She took it with both hands, her small fingers steady despite her shaking breath. Suddenly, boom! Something hit the cabin wall, hard. Dust rained from the ceiling, and a picture frame fell to the floor. Max barked again, louder, running in circles, trying to defend everyone at once. Leary ran to the corner, pulling the couch in front of the door. Jack grabbed his rifle and peeked through the window. He saw red eyes glowing in the dark. Dozens of them. The creatures had returned, and they had brought more. One of them stepped forward, larger than the others. Its skin was black and covered in shiny armor plates. Its mouth opened sideways, full of sharp teeth. It let out a screech that shook the windows. Jack didn't wait. He fired a shot through, the glass hitting the creature in the shoulder. It screamed but didn't fall, just got angrier. The creatures rushed the cabin, claws scratching wood, teeth biting at the windows. Leary fired the crossbow, her shot landing straight into one of the creature's necks. It fell back with a loud thud, writhing in the snow. Jack grabbed a homemade flare and lit it. He opened the window slightly and threw it out. Bright red light exploded in the snow, and the creatures scattered for a second, confused by the heat and color. But they didn't run. They regrouped, smarter now. They surrounded the cabin, scratching, testing the weak spots. One creature climbed the roof, making the wooden beams groan under its weight. Inside, Max barked at the ceiling, tail stiff. Leary reached into her pocket and pulled out the glowing stone. It was hot now, pulsing fast like a heartbeat. She pressed it to the floor and closed her eyes, whispering fast words in her language. The floor under the stone lit up with soft blue, lines spreading like vines. The lights climbed the walls, surrounding the room in a thin, glowing shield. Jack turned and stared, shocked. "What is that?" he whispered. Leary opened her eyes and looked at him. "Protection," she said, her voice small but strong. Just then, one creature slammed into the back window. The glass shattered, but the blue shield held. It bounced back, roaring in pain, its claws smoking from the energy. The cabin trembled with each hit. Jack and Leary stood side by side, one with a rifle, the other with glowing hands. Max barked again, then yelped as the ceiling groaned louder. A creature dropped through the roof, crashing into the living room. Jack fired instantly, hitting it in the chest, but it kept coming. Leary raised the stone and a flash of light burst forward. The creature froze, trapped inside the blue light like a statue. It let out one last scream, then crumbled into ash. Silence filled the room for a second. Even the other creatures outside paused, then came the sound. A hum, deep and rising. Leary's stone was glowing brighter than ever. She looked at Jack, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "They're coming." Jack's heart pounded. "Who's coming?" he asked. Leary pointed to the ceiling, to the stars above. "My people." Another boom hit the cabin, then another. But the blue shield held. The creatures screamed in frustration, clawing the walls, desperate to get in. Outside, the wind changed. The snow swirled upward instead of down. A soft blue light filled the forest sky. Something was approaching. Something from above. Inside the cabin, Leary held the stone to her chest. Max stood between her and the door, growling like a warrior. Jack reloaded his rifle, sweat on his brow, heart steady. He didn't know what was coming next, but he would fight for this girl, for this moment, for this home. The creatures were still out there, but they were no longer the hunters. Something greater had been called, and it was almost here. The blue light outside faded, but the tension inside the cabin stayed. Leary sat near the fire, her arms wrapped around Max. The pug had stopped barking, but he stayed alert, ears twitching at every sound. Jack stood near the door, rechecking. The rifle, his fingers moving slowly but with purpose. The creatures had pulled back, for now. But they weren't gone. They were planning, waiting for a weak moment. Snow began falling again, soft and steady, covering the blood outside. The wind howled through the trees, but inside the cabin, everything was silent. Too silent. It was the kind of quiet that warned of a final storm. Jack walked to the table and spread out an old map. Leary joined him, watching carefully. He pointed to their location, then to the east side of the woods, the place she had shown him before. She nodded slowly, then reached for a pencil. She circled 3 spots, dark areas in the forest. She drew symbols beside them. One looked like a claw, the other like a skull, and the third like a gate. Jack didn't understand it all, but he got the message. Those were the creatures' hunting grounds, and the gate, that must be where they came from. Max gave a soft bark, drawing their attention back. He stood near the wall. Tail stiff, staring at a window, Jack peeked outside. Nothing moved, but the hairs on his neck stood up. "They'll come again," Jack said. Leary looked at him and nodded. "Stronger," she whispered. Jack tapped the map, then the cabin floor. "Then we make this place ready," he said. All day they worked. They turned the small cabin into a fortress. Jack pulled out hidden supplies, spools of wire, cans of fuel, old steel sheets. Leary, though tired, helped with quiet determination. She climbed to the roof and patched the broken hole with melted metal from one of her glowing tools. Jack reinforced the windows with sharp nails pointing outward. They placed traps outside, pressure plates that would fire spikes, bells to warn of movement, even broken glass spread in the snow. Leary created glowing wards from the stone's energy, placing them on each wall. Where the blue symbols glowed, the air felt stronger, like a barrier around the cabin. Max sniffed each symbol, barked once, then lay beside them like a guard. That night, they didn't eat much, just dried meat and tea. But the silence between them was no longer fear. It was focus. They were preparing together, not as strangers anymore, but as a team. Jack handed Leary a small knife and showed her how to hold it. She already knew, her fingers sure and steady. He gave her a nod of respect. "You've done this before," he said. She looked down, then back at him. "Too many times," she answered. Later, as they sat near the fire, Leary unwrapped a cloth from her belt. Inside was a small device, round and cracked. She placed it gently on the table. Jack leaned. "Closer, what is it?" he asked. She pressed a button, and a soft blue light projected upward. A hologram appeared, an image of her home, tall crystal towers, blue skies, alien birds flying through glowing trees. Then the image shifted. Fire, explosions, the towers, falling. Dark shapes moved through the flames, the creatures but different, more controlled. Behind them stood a tall figure in shadow, wearing a crown of metal. Jack watched in silence. "That's who's after you," he said slowly. Leary nodded. "He wants the stone," she whispered. "It connects to my world, to the heart of our planet." She looked at the stone in her hand, now glowing softly again. "If he gets it, everything ends." Jack sat back, breathing out slowly. "So we don't let him get it," he said. Leary gave a faint smile. "Together," she said. Snow piled high outside. the sun fading into orange behind the trees. Jack loaded the last of the ammo into his belt. Leary checked the traps one more time. Max curled up near the door, his small body tense and ready. As night fell, the air grew cold again, but not from the weather. It was something darker. The forest outside moaned, like it was alive, crying a warning. And then, they came. Dozens of red eyes blinked into existence. Between the trees, the creatures had returned, not with rage but with purpose. They marched slowly, surrounding the cabin in silence. This time, there were more, and they were smarter. They had armor now, pieces of bone and metal wrapped around their bodies. Jack raised his rifle. Leary stood beside him, the stone glowing in one hand, the crossbow in the other. Max growled deep and loud, ready to defend his people. They had prepared all they could. Now it was time to fight. The traps were set. The barriers were glowing. The cabin wasn't just a home now, it was a battlefield, and they weren't just defending a place. They were protecting each other. A human, a girl from the stars, and a tiny dog with a big heart, against a darkness that refused to stop. The final battle had begun. The forest burned with red eyes. The creatures had surrounded the cabin from all sides. They didn't scream or charge this time. They moved slowly, step by step, as if they were listening to someone's command. Inside the cabin, the blue barrier shimmered softly. The glowing symbols on the walls pulsed in time with the stone in Leary's hand. Jack stood by the window, watching every movement outside. His finger rested on the rifle's trigger, but he didn't shoot yet. Max sat between them, low to the ground, growling deeply. Leary placed the stone on the table. It was brighter now, glowing like a star in her hands. Jack noticed that her hands were shaking, not from fear but from pressure. She's running out of strength, he thought. Leary pulled something from her satchel, a thin wire wrapped around a small metal disc. She set it beside the stone and connected the wire between them. Jack leaned closer. "What is that?" he asked. Leary looked up, sweat on her forehead. "Signal booster," she whispered. Jack's eyes widened. "You're calling someone?" She nodded and pointed upward, to the sky. "My people, my ship. They must hear me now." But the disc was damaged, the signal weak. Jack ran to the storage chest and pulled out his old radio set. It was dusty and worn, but it still worked. He brought it to the table, tore off the cover, and began connecting wires. Leary watched, eyes wide, as he worked quickly. His hands moved like a man who had done this during war. Minutes passed, the pressure outside growing stronger. The creatures started to press against the cabin walls. The wood groaned under their weight. One of the metal window covers shook from the force of their claws. Max barked, his small body stiff with alert. Leary held the stone steady, her voice rising into a chant. Soft blue waves spread across the ceiling, glowing brighter than before. The barrier held, but it was weakening. Jack connected the final wire. The radio sparked, then hissed. A hum filled the cabin, followed by a blinking green light. Leary gasped and placed her hand on the stone. The light shot upward, straight through the roof, piercing the clouds. It vanished into the sky, unseen by any creature below. Outside, the creatures stopped, their heads turned upward, sensing something they didn't understand. Then, roars, sharp and angry. They knew what she had done, and now they were desperate to stop it. One creature leapt at the front door, smashing its heavy body into the wood. Jack fired his rifle, the shot tearing into its shoulder. It fell back screeching. Another charged from the side, setting off a trap. A blast of sharp wooden spikes flew from the snow, impaling its legs. More came, faster now, no longer afraid of the barrier. They scratched, climbed, and slammed into the cabin. Leary fell to her knees, still holding the stone, the glow fading slightly. She had sent the signal, but now she had nothing left. Jack grabbed her shoulders. "Hold on," he said. "They heard you." Max barked again. Standing at the shattered window, he jumped forward, biting the arm of a creature that reached inside. The beast roared and pulled away, shaking the dog loose. Max hit the ground hard, letting out a yelp. Leary screamed and crawled to him, cradling Him in her arms, Jack's hands shook with rage. He reloaded the rifle, walked to the door, and opened it wide. Cold air rushed in as he stepped outside. The creatures looked up, surprised. He fired again and again, dropping 2 before they could. "Move!" The others snarled, rushing toward him, but then everything changed. The sky turned gold. A beam of light broke through the clouds, silent and powerful. Then a sound like a song, low and deep, filled the air. The creatures froze mid-run, their bodies trembling. Leary stood, still holding Max. Her eyes lifted to the sky. A shape appeared, huge, smooth, glowing. It was her people's ship, finally arriving. Blue circles formed in the air above the cabin. Beams of light shot downward, striking the creatures one by one. Each beast was frozen in place, then vanished into ash. One tried to run, but it too was caught, erased like dust in the wind. The ground stopped shaking. The trees calmed. Silence fell. Jack stood frozen, breathing hard, rifle still raised. Leary stepped outside with Max in her arms. The blue light from above wrapped around her. Soft and warm, it healed her wounds, and slowly Max's body stirred again. The little dog blinked and licked her face. She laughed, a real, full laugh, her first in a long time. Jack lowered his rifle and stepped beside her. The ship hovered, overhead humming like a gentle storm. Then a voice came from the light speaking Leary's language. She answered, her voice strong again. She turned to Jack, her eyes filled with emotion. "They came," she whispered. "You helped me bring them." Jack smiled, tired but proud. "You did it," he said. "No," she said softly, placing her hand on his chest. "We did it." The ship hovered silently above the trees. Its blue lights shimmered across the snow like dancing fireflies. The air smelled of ozone and rain. Though the sky was clear, Leary stood just outside the cabin, her small frame glowing softly under the golden beam. She held Max close to her chest and he wagged his tail gently, sleepy but alive. Jack stood a few steps behind her, watching the sky. His cabin was half destroyed, walls cracked, windows broken, and smoke curling from the roof. But he didn't care about that now. What mattered was that they had survived. More beams of light floated down through the trees. Figures appeared. Tall, graceful beings with shining armor and glowing eyes. They looked like living stars. They moved slowly, calmly, surrounding Leary like she was something precious. Which, to them, she was. One of them stepped forward and knelt before her. He spoke. In her language, his voice kind and deep. She replied softly, then pointed to Jack. The tall alien turned and looked at the human with curious eyes. Leary walked over to Jack, standing in front of him. She placed Max gently on the ground. Then, she reached up and took Jack's hand. "I told them," she said quietly. "You saved me." Jack gave a small nod. "I just did what was right," he said. Her fingers tightened around his. "You gave me a home," she whispered. "You didn't run from me." One of the tall aliens stepped forward and spoke in English. "You have done a great thing," he said to Jack. "Leary is not just a survivor. She is our memory keeper. She holds the voice of our people." Jack blinked, surprised. He looked at Leary, who gave him a soft smile. "I wasn't just running from monsters," she said. "I was carrying history, stories, secrets. They wanted the stone because it holds everything." The alien leader held out a glowing crystal. "Take this," he said. "A gift from our people." Jack accepted it, the crystal warm in his hand. Suddenly, he saw flashes, memories. Not his own. Leary as a child. Her world before the destruction. Her people singing under twin moons. Then the fires, the creatures, the escape. And finally, his cabin, the firelight. Max barking, Leary smiling for the first time. He gasped and almost dropped the crystal. Leary steadied his hand. "It's okay," she said. "Now you carry part of my story." She turned and walked towards the beam of light that would take her home. The alien stepped aside, forming a silent path. Jack stood still, his heart heavy. He didn't want to say goodbye. Max whimpered softly, padding to Leary's side. She knelt and hugged the little dog, tightly. then stood again, blinking back tears. Jack raised a hand in farewell. "Take care of yourself, Leary," he said. She stepped into the beam, then stopped. She looked back, eyes full of something deep, not sadness, not fear, but a question, a choice. Leary turned to the alien leader and said something sharp and quick. He looked surprised, then gave a slow nod. He raised his hand, and the beam faded away. Jack stared, confused. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Leary walked back toward him, each step sure. She stopped in front of him, placed both hands on his chest. "I don't want to go," she said softly. "Not yet." Jack blinked. "Your people are here," he said. "You're home." She shook her head. "This feels like home too." The alien leader approached again. "Leary has chosen to stay," he said. "She has that right. But she will not be alone." He handed Jack a small orb. "Call us, and we will come," he said. "Your kindness is known." With that, the aliens faded back into the beams. One by one, they rose into the sky. The ship hummed once, then lifted higher. A final pulse of light swept the forest, healing the broken trees, clearing the blood-stained snow, repairing what could be saved. Then the ship was gone. Silence returned. Only the fire crackled now, and the wind whispered through the trees. Leary stood beside Jack, Max sitting between them. The cabin was damaged, but the land was quiet, peaceful again. Jack looked down at her. "You sure?" he asked. She nodded. "I've run for too long," she said. "But now, I want to stay." He smiled. "Well," he said, "I've got some extra blankets and Max has already claimed you." Leary laughed, wiping a tear from her cheek. She knelt and hugged Max again. He barked and licked her face, tail wagging like crazy. That night they sat by the fire, Leary wearing one of Jack's old hoodies again. Jack cooking soup in a dented pot. Max curled up beside them, snoring softly. The forest outside was still, the sky above clear and full of stars. Leary looked up and whispered a soft thank you to the sky, then leaned against Jack's side, safe, warm, home. The girl who had once been hunted, broken, and alone, was now part of a new family, a human, a little pug, and an alien girl. Together, beneath the stars,